Hi, hello to anyone watching this video. This is a video about setting up IAM Identity Center in AWS. IAM Identity Center is a tool that you can use to centrally manage access to a bunch of different AWS accounts. I wrote a guide a little while ago about how I set up Identity Center for myself and my own personal accounts, how I use it. I've had some people go through the guide, and sometimes they have questions or they want a little bit more detail about a certain part. I've been thinking for a little while, it'd be nice to make a video just walking through the process, how I built my Identity Center, showing a little bit about how I use it. I do kind of think Identity Center is maybe one of those things in AWS world that's perhaps a little bit slept on. Maybe not everyone knows about it, especially when you're new to building in AWS. And even if people do know about it, maybe they don't realize that it's very useful for use cases beyond just that big enterprise environment where there's a lot of users. I use it with myself as the only user managing 4, 5, 6 AWS accounts at any given time. It's saved me a lot of time and it has totally eliminated my need to use long term access credentials, which is awesome for security. It's totally free and it doesn't really take that long to get it up and running. So let me show you how I did it. I traveled forward in time a little bit to give you a sneak preview of what Identity Center actually is and what we're going to be building in this video. We talked a little bit about the security benefits, not having to create access keys, which is great. Beyond that, the real reason I love this is because it's useful. For me, I love AWS. I'm a huge tinker in AWS. I probably spend way too much time in AWS trying to learn how to do different things, building different personal projects. I always find myself managing about 4 or 5 accounts at any given time. I have accounts I use for more long term applications. I have some accounts I use for storage. I have one account I just use whenever I'm studying for a certification or if I'm going through a long term course or something like that. I want a playground where I know I have no risk of touching any of my other stuff. I want to make sure I'm managing all these different accounts responsibly. And also, honestly, I just am lazy. I'm lazy and I get annoyed if I have to navigate console to console. I'm logging in, I'm logging out all the time. I have to reconfigure the command line, all that stuff. So, Identity Center really solves that problem for me because right here from this one central location, I can access the console for any of my different AWS accounts that are part of the Identity Center with literally one click. So, let's say I want to go mess around in this Terra Cloud account for a little while. I just click this management console link. Identity Center federates me into the Terra Cloud account as a federated user. Boom, I'm in the Terra Cloud account. I can start building, I can start doing what I want to do. But maybe, oh, this was the wrong account, or I want to start working on a different project, or maybe I have an application that spans multiple accounts. Now I can just as easily go back to Identity Center. Now maybe I want to log into my Terra main account. So I click Management Console again and I'll get federated into that Terra main account. I can go on with whatever I'm trying to do. The console access is really easy, and then the same principle applies for programmatic access to AWS. When I click this command line or programmatic access link, Identity Center creates for me a set of temporary credentials I can use at the command line or for programmatic access. These are temporary credentials that expire at the end of each session. Even if I were to accidentally leak them or something like that, they're only usable for a very short amount of time. Really, I could probably even get away with not blurring them out in this video, but that felt too icky. I just couldn't do it. That's why this is such a plus for your security posture is because instead of using access keys that could be around for years and get breached, you're using time-limited credentials that become invalid as soon as your session is over. Same principle applies. If I wanted to interact with any other account programmatically, I come right back to IAM Identity Center and I can generate temporary credentials for any account right from one place. I think it's really quite cool. And now that you've seen what the final product looks like, let's get started. There are a couple prerequisites I would recommend you have ready to go as we get started. On the left, here in Obsidian, my Markdown editor, I've made a list of the 4 accounts that I want to add to my Identity Center. This is a list of demo AWS accounts that I have, but I've named them and organized them in the exact same way that I organize my actual Identity Center. For each of those accounts, I've gathered the account name. That doesn't have to match any value. That's just for me and my own mental organization. And then for each of the accounts you want to add, you're going to need either the account ID or the owner email address. You need one or the other. I just took down both, but that's prerequisite number one. Get the accounts you want to add organized. On the right, I'm logged into the AWS console in my Terra main account. You need to pick one AWS account that's going to be the main account, the management account for your Identity Center. For me, that Terra main account I think of as my main AWS account. It was my first AWS account I ever made. I have a lot of stuff in there. This is like an account where if the apocalypse were to come, this will be one of the last things I ever lose access to. So pick a management account. Once you're signed into that main account that you've chosen, start by navigating to AWS Organizations. So, AWS Organizations is essentially like the backbone of our identity center. That means before we create our identity center, we need to create an organization in our main account. If you're not super familiar with the AWS Organization service, there are a few things that are important to know and understand before we get this organization created. Organizations is a totally free service. You won't pay to have it enabled in your account. That said, it does impact your AWS bill in that all the accounts in your organization will go into what's called consolidated billing. What consolidated billing means is that the management account in your organization pays the bills for all the accounts in the organization. And there are things you can do like cost allocation tagging to keep breaking down the costs. But just know that you're going to go into consolidated billing. You're going to start getting one bill for all accounts, and that bill will go to the management account. The second thing that's important to understand about organizations is that at the time I'm making this video, an AWS account can only be part of one organization at any given time. So, if any of these accounts you're wanting to add to your identity center are already in an organization, you're going to have to figure out how to navigate that, make a decision if you want those accounts to leave the organization they're already in so they can join your new organization. That is a limitation that's in place. Lastly, when you organize your AWS accounts into an organization, that changes the way you interact with free tier. You can read more about it in the free tier FAQs. I'll link below. Essentially, when your accounts are in an organization, you no longer can access free tier offers in each account. Instead, AWS is going to aggregate your activity across all the different accounts and determine if you've exceeded free tier usage, and you'll be charged standard rates. For me, my use case, these are my personal little dinky AWS accounts. I'm spending barely any money in there regardless. The benefits of the organization and the identity center definitely outweigh any limitations for me. So I'm going to go ahead and create my AWS organization. In the main AWS account, in the AWS organizations console, I'm going to create the new organization by clicking this create an organization button. Brilliant. Here's our newly created AWS organization. You can see we've got that Terra main account, or Terra demo main as it's called here because I'm in my demo environment. And that's going to be the management account of the organization. Our next step is to invite the three secondary AWS accounts to join the organization using this add an AWS account button. If we wanted to, we could create a new account right here in the organization, which is very useful. But in this case, we're going to invite existing AWS accounts to the organization. And it's super lovely, very easy because we can add more than one account at once. So I want to demonstrate we've got these three secondary accounts, and we can add accounts using either the account ID or we can use the owner email address for the account. We'll get all three secondary accounts added here. Once we've got that the way we want it, we scroll down. We could add a tagging configuration here if we wanted to, but just for the sake of this video, keep it simple. So we're going to hit send invitation, and that invites these three other accounts to join the organization in our main account. We can see an invitation to join the organization has been sent. In the AWS console, we can always check the status of these invitations by coming over here to invitations. We can see we've got those three invitations we just sent to the three different accounts. Right now, each of those invitations has a status of open. The next thing we need to do is go into those AWS accounts and accept these invitations. The secondary accounts can accept these invitations in a couple of different ways. The first way, you could log into the email account for that owner email address that you used, and you'll see you have this email invitation letting you know you got invited to join an AWS organization. In the email, you'll see some information about the organization that invited you. You'll see some more information about what it means to join an organization overall. That covers some of the stuff we talked about as far as the consolidated billing, et cetera. So that'd be very good to read through if this is the first time you've done this. And then the main thing is you can use this accept invitation button. The accept invitation button brings you here to the organization's console where you can accept the invitation. So here you can see now the organization details for the organization that your account just became a part of. Another option for accepting the invitation is just log directly into the AWS console. I like to use different browser profiles so I can stay logged in all over the place. But log into the AWS console for the secondary account in which you need to accept the invitation. You can navigate to AWS organizations. When you get to the AWS organizations console, you'll see that you have one invitation here waiting for you. So just click this view one invitation. You'll see the invitation, you'll see the details about the organization that's inviting you, and then you just click accept invitation right here. And that green banner means that you've successfully joined the organization from this account as well. So that was my Terra study and my Terra DevOps accounts added to the organization. Now we should be able to come back to the AWS Organizations console and back to that list of pending invitations. We can do a refresh and we can see that 2 accounts have accepted the invitation and 1 account still has a pending invitation with a status of open. So I'm going to go quickly accept the invitation in that 3rd account. Then I'll have all my secondary accounts part of the organization and we'll move on. All the accounts have accepted the invite, joined the party. We're getting close. We can see here we've got the 3 secondary accounts that we want part of the Identity Center and that Terra main account as the management account. Perfect. Now we're ready to go create our Identity Center. Make sure you're in that main AWS account and navigate to IAM Identity Center. Here's the IAM Identity Center console. We just need to click Enable right here. Keep in mind, IAM Identity Center is a free service. It won't cost any money for us to enable this. And because we already have that organization set up, IAM Identity Center is going to know automatically to integrate with our organization. Okay, how exciting. It's getting real now. We've got our Identity Center spun up. Just so you know, in case it's not obvious, this isn't my real Identity Center. This is one I'm just spinning up for this video, and then I'm going to tear it down. So you might see some things you're surprised are not blurred out. And trust me, it feels icky to me too. But just to really make sure this video is easy to follow, I'm going to leave some stuff naked that I normally wouldn't. Anyway, if you've used Identity Center before, you might know that we are looking for an access portal URL. The access portal URL is how we access the actual Identity Center that you saw at the beginning of the video. And here's that URL right here. Let's give it a click. We hit this sign in page. And here's the rub. We actually do not have any credentials to sign into this sign in page yet. Our normal AWS IAM users have no power here. We can't log in with those credentials. The next thing we need to do is create an Identity Center user to be able to sign into the Identity Center access portal. We're back here on the IAM Identity Center dashboard, and we're going to navigate to users and then add user. We can give our user any username we want within the input restrictions here. I think I might just call my user Tara, which is my name. And then for a password, we can either send an email to the user with password setup instructions or generate a one-time password. I'm going to use a one-time password. Email address, first, last name, and display name are required fields. Everything else we can skip for now, but when you're doing this for real, you might want to take a look at it. If we were in a situation where we were going to be adding a bunch of users to this Identity Center, we would definitely want to think about organizing them into groups so we could apply permissions at a group level. This Identity Center is only ever going to be just for me, most likely, so I'm going to not worry about groups. Review our options for configuring the user, add user. Amazing. Now we have some credentials we can give a try. So this is that same access portal URL. This time, instead of having an identity crisis, we have credentials to use. Here's my username. Next. It thinks it has a password autosave, but that's not correct. We'll copy the one-time password. Oh man, my autosave is going to be tweaking out right now, but we'll sign in. I'm going to be prompted to register my MFA device. We'll talk a little bit more about MFA in a moment. For now, I'm just going to register my MFA device real quick and then I'll come back. That's my MFA sorted. And just in case you don't know how to set up MFA like this, I'll link to some instructions in this video as well. Next, I imagine I'll be prompted to create an actual password. All right, got a password set up for now. Set new password. Logging in, and nothing. We can't see anything yet, and we're getting this message, you do not have any applications. We're seeing this message because although we have created the Identity Center and created the Identity Center user, our user does not have permission to anything in the Identity Center yet. The next thing that we need to do is create something called a permission set. To create the permission set, we're back in the IAM Identity Center dashboard. Navigate to permission sets, then create permission set. We can use predefined permission sets or custom permission sets. Custom permission sets are what's going to let you get really granular with what users in your Identity Center can and can't do. For my use case, I'm just going to use a predefined permission set. But if you're really implementing this at scale, think about what's most appropriate. Same goes for this. I'm going to create a permission set with the administrator access policy, which is essentially God mode in AWS. I'm okay with this because these are my AWS accounts that I own. I want to be able to jump around in really quickly and do absolutely anything in. I also know I have very robust budget alerts already set up as well as other security monitoring. So I feel okay with using a permission policy like this. For you, if you're following along with this, make sure to really think it through before just mimicking what I'm doing because administrator access is a really significant policy to attach here. Once we attach this permission to our user, anybody who gets access to your identity center as your user is going to be able to access your account with this administrator access policy. We can enter a description. We could give it a different name if we want. I'm just going to leave it as that descriptive administrator access. Also, I just noticed, I think maybe AWS doesn't have a dark mode view for this page yet, which is kind of interesting. So, anyway, sorry if you're suddenly blinded by this Snow White UI we're looking at. The most interesting option here, I would say, is session duration. This determines when your user uses the Identity Center to federate into one of the AWS accounts, how long their session will last in that AWS account before the console essentially just boots them out and they have to federate in again. It's kind of a trade off, right? Because probably the shorter session duration you have, the better for your security posture, probably the better practice there. However, in terms of convenience, user annoyance, if you're going to be in there doing really long work sessions, it's going to be annoying when you get booted out of the console. That's really the decision you're making, convenience versus probably what's the security best practice. For me, I'm going to start with 8 hours here. If I ever feel like that's not appropriate anymore, I can always come back and change it. Review the options we selected and create. Gosh, I guess I'm never going to get back into dark mode. Have I been in light mode this whole time? I can't even believe it. Anyway, we've created the permission set. And now our next step is we need to attach the permission set to our user. We're going to come over here in the navigation and select AWS accounts. This is where we basically put all the puzzle pieces together. We're going to select each of the AWS accounts from our organization that we want our Identity Center user to be able to access from the Identity Center. I want my Identity Center user to be able to come to the Identity Center and log into any of my accounts from my organization. So I'm going to select every account here. I'm going to select assign users or groups. We didn't create a group, so I'm going to switch to users. I'm going to select my Identity Center user we created, hit next. Select the administrator access permission set we just created. You can see here what would really be the best practice if you had multiple users would be to have different permission sets that you could apply to different users in different groups based on what they absolutely need to do. Managing these different little personal accounts is kind of the atypical use case for Identity Center. I'm breezing through a part you should put a lot more thought into if you were setting up an Identity Center at scale. But part of the point of this video is to show it's not really hard to use Identity Center to manage your own personal accounts. And in that situation, I think it's all right to take this approach as long as you know what you're doing. Excellent. So we've got our Identity Center user, we've got our permission set. We're going to click submit. We get this message configuring. We can tell something really good's happening because we get a progress bar. We get a nice green success message here telling us that AWS has applied the updated permission set to our accounts. Now, big moment. Let's go back to our Identity Center access URL, hit refresh, and voila. Click AWS account. Ta-da, here it is, a fully functioning Identity Center with our 4 accounts. This is exactly what you saw at the start of this video when you saw how we could navigate to the different management consoles. Works the exact same way. Here we are jumping into TerraCloud. We federate in as a user. We're in this TerraCloud account with our administrator access permission set. If we wanted to use a different account, we could jump into, for example, this Terra Study account I used to study for exams, open the link, and now we're in that different account. Awesome. That's really all there is to setting up the Identity Center. There's a lot more stuff you can do with it, and I'm going to make another video about how we can use the AWS SSO command from the command line to automatically refresh our credentials when we're working programmatically, which is an awesome feature, one of the best functionalities of the whole thing. Before I close out this video, I do want to show you one other very important thing, so make sure to hang on for this. I'm back on the IAM Identity Center dashboard. I want to show you how you can ensure that you have MFA required anytime a user signs into your Identity Center. We can scroll down here to IAM Identity Center. The Configure Multi-Factor Authentication page gives us different MFA options. I'm basically just going to get in here and see how high I can crank up these settings. For example, it says we can prompt users for MFA few different options. I'm going to choose every time they sign in, always on. We can choose how users can authenticate. I'm going to allow both these MFA types. And I'm going to require my users to register an MFA device at sign in if they don't have one registered. Please, 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 I beg of you, if you are following along with this video and you have created an identity center, make sure you require MFA on your identity center. You saw when we talked about the permission sets and when we demonstrated how the identity center works, how much damage somebody could do if they breached your identity center, even though the sessions are temporary, which is good. There is still that single point of failure aspect where if a bad actor were to breach your identity center, they could probably do a lot of damage in a short amount of time, especially if you're using permissive permission sets like the one I'm using in this video walkthrough. MFA is just one of those really simple things that we can put in place that makes your identity center that much safer. I think it's really important. With that, we're going to save the changes to the MFA configuration. And congratulations, you made it to the end of the process. Let's just take one last longing look at this beautiful identity center we created with MFA required with our 4 different accounts. I honestly do just love it so much, and I hope if you set it up, you get a lot of use out of it too. That's the end. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found at least some of it useful. If you have any questions, any comments, or anything you think I got wrong, definitely let me know. I would love to hear from you. I hope you have a great time accessing all your accounts and building in the cloud.